we'll get into our first topic now, and we're asking, should the government crack down on people who have second homes? Get your calls in for this now. The number of second homes have risen by more than 50% in the last decade, and there are now almost 500,000 in England, and there are warnings that rural and seaside hotspots are being turned into ghost towns. Now, some councils are taking the matters into their own hands. Parts of Yorkshire and Devon, there are bans on new build properties being used as second homes, and in some parts of Wales, like Pembrokeshire, second home owners face a 300% premium council tax. Now, are these things a good idea, or is it time that we get tough on people who own a second home, or is it actually just punishing people who have done well for themselves? I'm going to start with you, James. I think you might have a second home.
You might be right. I suppose the whole point about this is that it's very... it's actually much more complicated than you just starting to say, let's punish people who have second homes. Because in many places, the second homeowners will contribute to the economy, the local economy. Very often they'll provide all sorts of influx in terms of the local shops. They might take friends there. They might help, particularly if it's a sort of like a tourist resort or a destination resort. And then also, if they're paying their council tax, which they are, then they're actually paying their full council tax that will go to services that they're probably not using, or certainly not using as much. So I think there's already a tax. In addition to that, they will have paid 3% extra stamp duty. They will be paying capital gains tax if they sell that home. So there are lots of ways and means in which people are already paying more. And I do think that there's a danger that we end up with the politics of envy. However, I do think that there are ways and means, and there are better ways and means to make sure that local people have the ability to buy and live in houses where they were born. Well, so say, for example, the idea of building houses which can't be used as second homes, I think is probably a good one. I think making sure that properties which are just lying empty and not being looked after at all, that's another way. And then also making sure that people are just using them for Airbnbs, unless that's what the local council need or want. Again, if somebody's just rinsing it for cash, I think that's different from somebody who uses it and lives in it. So I think it is more complicated. And then you also have to look at, well, what about the families that, for example, were families, then for whatever reason the marriage goes wrong, then suddenly they've got two homes. So is it right or wrong that the way we live our lives, people are single for longer, people are living separate lives perhaps because of divorce or various other things. There are lots of reasons why in society people might want to have more homes. And frankly, we've got to stop interrupting people's lives and allow people to make their own minds up and use and choose how they spend their money.
Yeah, let them choose.
Oh, he's made me cry. How I
envy.
feel envy. I do not envy you, your second home. I do think it's marvellous, the storytelling, the plucking at our heartstrings. You know, they're buying cappuccinos in these places. Why don't we value them? Come on. I think it's absolutely right that we should completely crack down on second homes. Why can't you just rent a property if you want to go somewhere?
That's your choice.
No, it's not.
Then
Well, then.
Okay, so who's
So
going
then
to own that?
pay the taxes.
Who's going to own that property that you
I
rent out?
didn't, James.
Who's going to own
Just
it?
a reminder, I didn't interrupt you, and you gave us this wonderful, heart-wringing essay. So
Well,
would you
good.
not interrupt me when I speak?
Well, it depends what you say.
No, I'm sorry.
I just
Don't
want a
interrupt.
row.
OK, Yasmin, go on.
Go on.
Don't
You have the floor.
interrupt. Men, absolutely right that these second homes, which are a kind of, often for many of them, another way of avoiding tax, putting their extra cash where it wants. I know so many friends, and I hope they're not offended, who have these properties which they barely use. Yeah?
But that's their choice, surely, Yasmin.
It's not choice. These are we have a real crisis where there's homelessness across, not just in rural areas and in places where people are buying these houses for their views, everywhere. We're not looking after people who haven't got any way of getting homes or even of renting anymore. And so anything
But let's not forget that actually in the past, people buying second homes in these areas have very much benefited the people that lived there before, because they're selling them at inflated prices and therefore they're taking away more cash.
We're in a different place now. We are now at a time, partly because we've had a Conservative government which has privileged the privileged. Let's just face up to it, OK? So I think a huge increase in council tax, maybe insisting that the house is used at least half the year, OK?
Would that be acceptable then, James? Actually, if people have second homes but they're only using it, let's say 2 weeks a year, they must rent them out to holidaymakers for 6 months.
I understand some of those arguments, but I think the problem is that your arguments are so politically skewed that you can't see that there's any element of common sense here. And some of it is common sense when it comes to let's make sure that we use the properties that we have up and down the country. Quite right. I couldn't agree more. But I also think, though, that, for example, if you live in a town and then somebody, for example, does have Airbnb, so you say, oh, just rent a house. Actually, for the local economy and the local people to have Airbnbs every week is hideous for them. Why? Because people turn up for a week and they're on holiday, they're partying for a week. It's horrible to have that next door to you if it's a party house or if it turns out.
I never said Airbnb, did I?
No. Well, Airbnb or renting it out or whatever you want.
No,
so you
that's
said
different.
if you want to have a second home or if you wanted one, why don't you just rent it? But
no, I said go 6 months of the year, use it.
Yes, of course.
Well, that's different, isn't it? Enforced using it is slightly different.
But you're telling people how to use their stuff.
Yes.
Ruth from
Yes.
Hertfordshire.
We are told to do a lot of things, James, and you lot who own these properties are not exempt from being told what to do.
Ruth from Hertfordshire, what's your thoughts on second homes? Is it a problem in your area?
Well, it is, because they're closing all our roads down. We live in a little village in Elsnham, and we can't get into Bishop Stortford. They've closed the whole road from Stansted onto Bishop Stortford, all to the new houses. And I just think it's ridiculous.
Hold on, Ruth, let me understand this, because I don't understand why a road's been closed down because of second homes. Is this because they're building new properties?
Yeah.
Ah, OK. And your fear is that people are going to buy these properties that already own other properties and they're just going to be left empty?
Yeah. Half of them are, anyway.
But they haven't been built yet, Ruth, so how do you know?
Yeah, some of them round here have been built and they're all empty.
OK, and this is for holidaymakers. How often are they occupied? Do the people turn up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks of the year?
I don't know. I really don't know.
So I can hear your frustration. I can hear the difficulties of, just when properties are built round about your area anyway with the sort of extra footfall, that's annoying, and the extra traffic. But I can hear your concerns if actually you think they're going to be just invested in and left dormant. What would you like to see happen then?
We'll stop building buildings around our areas.
Well, Ruth,
because they're little villages and now they're going into towns.
Well, I think the problem with that is we have a housing crisis, so I'm not sure many people would be very supportive of a ban on house building in general.
Well, I don't know, because it's going on everywhere. My sister lives in Whitton and that's being built up terribly.
But with the housing crisis, is this not a good thing that actually we're seeing more houses being built?
No, I don't think it is.
Well, what would you like to happen to all the people that
you
can't
buy
find a
your
house?
own house because you want to live in a little village, and now it's beginning to get like a town.
I'm afraid, Ruth, that's maybe because the population is expanding. Yeah, you don't sound very convinced by that. James, do you have much sympathy
I'm not.
for Ruth?
Well, I think that the problem with housing is that there are so many competing interests. So on some hands, people say, I buy this home and I want it to be protected, so we end up with the knot in my backyard, and that's perfectly understandable. But then, of course, we as society have to take decisions as to where we want to have homes. We've also, people say, oh, we haven't got any space anymore. 9% of the United Kingdom is built on, so the rest of it isn't.
Yeah,
so
but that's because Ruth doesn't want things built next to her.
But in fact, we have got plenty of what's known as brownfield sites, which we could build if we used our tax more effectively. So I'm really against using tax as a kind of a stick to beat people because apparently they can afford it, as opposed to saying let's use tax to encourage people to build the right things in the right places where we want it, where we're going to put infrastructure. Because you shouldn't just be building where just because you can. You've got to build schools and hospitals and roads and rail and all these other things to make people's lives better and to help the society.
Is that part of your criticism, Ruth, that actually there isn't enough infrastructure in place to support these new houses that are being built?
No, there isn't. And as well as that, we went to a meeting a couple of years ago and there were councillors there and they're all voting, oh, yeah, we should have this built, we should have that built around our area. And I said, where do you live? Oh, there was some place or other. I said, are they building there? She went, oh, no. And I said, well, then why aren't they? But you can answer me.
Well, I'm sure she couldn't, and I see there's very much a not in my backyard feeling about what you're talking about here. Can you see any benefits to the increased homes that are being built in your area? Like the investment that it'll give, perhaps more infrastructure will be built in the future?
No.
No, you're just not happy about it at all.
No, not at all.
I can't argue with you on that, Ruth. Thank you very much for your call. 0207 862 2222 is the number for your views. Second homes, are they a problem? We've got messages coming in on social media. Let me get them up. Valerie on Facebook says, I think we need to crack down on empty, unused properties instead of building new homes. Well, apparently, according to our last caller, some properties are being built to remain unused. People are buying them and then just not visiting. Jennifer on Twitter says, yes, it is unfair that rich people have more than one house when many young people can't afford to buy. Now, there's an argument, James. When we are in a housing crisis, young people can't afford to get on the ladder, and yet we have people like yourself who have done very well for themselves and have decided to purchase two properties, inflating house prices and making it even more difficult for young people.
That is an argument, but then on the other hand, older people always have more than younger people because, we've either been working longer or living longer or whatever it may be. And there are other ways and means in which we can get younger people onto the housing market. We've got stupid tax laws. We've got stupid lending laws, which have been put in by various different governments over the years, both parties, by the way, on lending criteria. And we've had both parties which have taken away various incentives to have people being able to afford. I want to have everybody in society should be able to buy their own home. But also, I think this very pernicious kind of argument that you employ, which I think it's emotive and it's actually quite disgusting what you're insinuating.
What?
It is. It really is.
Are you calling somebody because I don't support you, rich git, and you're right to have a yeah, you are a rich git, and I haven't called you disgusting.
QED.
You have not. I've not called you disgusting.
You don't know anything about where.
Excuse me. There are people agreeing with me out there. Are they also disgusting to you?
No, I think it's the views
Are they also disgusting?
It's the views which are disgusting.
No,
not you.
Are their views also disgusting?
I think if people.
I think I dare you to tell me that those people who've just said.
I just did.
That they are disgusting. Their views are disgusting.
The view is disgusting
just use
because.
your language in a more civilised way.
No.
Okay, let me speak.
I'm just going to stop you here because I think you've both used language that is questionable, and so we'll just draw a line in the sand and we'll go back to our callers and allow you to calm down. But it was the views that were disgusting and not you personally.
Yeah, not you personally.
No, my views are not disgusting.
Okay, to
They're
James,
not disgusting.
His opinion.
They're views.
Marianne from Derbyshire, help me out here. How do you feel about second homes? You've got the TV on. Good, we've come up with another problem here. OK, Marianne, turn your TV down. We're going to come back to you in just a second. Lauren from Essex, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Hi, Storm.
Great.
How are you doing?
What's your thoughts on second homes? Are they causing you any issues?
I just think that it's upset me in a way that we've probably got the highest rate of homelessness. We've had in ages. Now, my problem is I lived in a property for 15 years in social housing. Mm-hmm. With the crisis we've got in homelessness at the moment, what really seems to bother me is the fact with private real estate being put up left, right and centre, that these seem to be more readily available to people who can afford to buy a second home a lot of the time than people who are struggling to get on their feet. Yes, you can argue it's about the economy, it's about the banks not being making mortgages and things like that more affordable. I think the problem starts from the ground up. The government, I really don't think are in touch with the homelessness crisis. And what they're doing is leaving it to local authorities to find these people accommodation. I mean, in my mum's local authority... Yeah, go on, sorry.
I think, Lauren, what you're talking about is the lack of social housing that we have in this country, which is a huge problem and actually one that we do talk about fairly regularly, particularly on this show. But it may be the same problem as second homes. Second home owners may be taking away all the housing and then it's just a shift up.
That's right.
But it might also be a separate issue. Yasmin, what do you think? Are they two different problems here? Do we need the government to build more social housing and stop second homes?
But also when it comes to buying, James forgot to mention that actually wages have either gone down in many occupations or there is insecure work that young people have to do, or they not getting mortgages because there's no, they can't promise to be able to pay what they're expected to pay. So the fat cats, and I will call them that, are not doing their bit by giving young people in particular proper wages or salaries so they can get a foot up on the ladder.
But even if they could get a foot up on the ladder, there may not be houses for them to buy, both because
exactly.
the prices
So there
are
is that
inflated
problem.
and also because they're not
No
there.
social housing. People are charging far too much rent. And then, of course, the house prices. Now, mortgage rates are coming down. So maybe there's hope. But it can only happen if we have a supply of affordable housing.
It is an interesting,
we don't have that supply.
It's an interesting point that you bring up in terms of the cost of the rent, because actually if you're going to allow second homes but you're going to charge the owner a 300% markup on their council tax, they're going to put that onto the rent. So then you want the house to be occupied, and then the rent is then unaffordable for the people that live there anyway. Lauren, thank you very much for bringing up the affordable housing and the council houses element, because that for sure plays a part in this. Marianne from Derbyshire, you're back, your TV's on mute. Terrific news. Second homes, how do you feel about them?
I think we need to get back to the debate whether or not second homes are classed as the evil entity here, or whether there is actually an economy that it's generating, especially in rural areas, for example, like the Derbyshire Dales. There's very little employment in this area. So holidays is what it's all about. Tourism is what it's all about. I create an economy in my area because I've got holiday rentals. However, I haven't got holiday homes. A holiday home is when somebody comes and stays for 2 weeks of the year, and then the rest of the year it's closed, it's empty, there's nobody in it. They're not contributing to the area at all, and I totally disagree with those people. But when it comes to actually contributing to the area and creating jobs within the area, creating an economy, my guests spend money in this area. They eat out, they buy food out, they go to the pubs, they spend money in the rural...
What you're trying to say is actually there's two different, when we're talking about second homes, there's two different types of owners. There is an owner that adds to the community and adds to the industry and the tourism industry in that area.
But at the moment though, Storm, we're all being tarred with the same brush.
Well,
we're all being called. This Airbnb situation is causing us chaos. It really is. It's a noun now, Airbnb is. And basically all that we're doing is we have got a business in the tourist industry, but you're not differentiated between the two. We are either a holiday rental or we're a holiday home, and it's different, and it should be distinguished between the two.
Well, I should mention there are other ways of renting your property for holiday lets, but still we're talking about short-term lets, which come with their own issues, but you think that they should be separate. James, would you agree with that? That somebody that owns a house and doesn't rent it to anybody else but leaves it empty for, let's say, 11 months of the year, and somebody that rents it out like Marianne does?
I mean, I think this is what I said right at the beginning, which is it's complicated. And if we're trying to get property to be used more, I agree. If we're trying to get more supply, I don't think we should be talking about social housing in the same sentence that we talk about second homes, because they're very different product. And the last point here is even the use of it. So if, for example, somebody is using their home and they're there every week, there are people who commute or they travel around the world for their job, and then they live in their home at the weekend. You know, there are different people use properties in different ways. So if somebody turns up and they use it for 2 weeks a year, that's a very different contributor to an economy than somebody who's there every week and all the time. So we've got to stop putting all of these housing issues in one bucket, because otherwise you do end up with the politics of envy and the wrong decisions that won't help local communities. I'm all up for helping local communities. I'm all up for people paying their fair share and making sure that we contribute to the services that we want and the infrastructure that we need. But I think if we start doing this, then it becomes highly politicised, and you don't get a good result.
Everything is political, James.
Yeah, sure.
You may not like it. Everything is political.
Oh, sure it is. I agree.
It looks like all of these councils are making their own decisions in terms of what they're going to do with the second home issues, if indeed they think it is an issue, and only time will tell whether it works out for them or not. Marianne, thank you very much for calling up and making that distinction. Thank you for all your calls after the break.